Hello, thank you for tuning into 40 Acres News Media. My name is Ariel Johnson, and I'm sitting here today with Mr. Dewayne Hendrix. How are you?
Great, great. Good to
Good,
be here.
good, good. I met this gentleman last weekend at an event out here in Fort Worth called State of the Black Community, and he was one of the members of the panel that day. And I would have to say that I was captivated by his responses to some of the questions that were posed. And he is also an author. We're going to hold up this book. It says Supreme Science on the front, but on the back it says, Does the Matrix Really Exist? So as you can possibly imagine, this is a very deep brother. And initially I thought we would talk about his book, but I decided that we would talk about current events and our people, and see if he can offer us some jewels that can help us on this new awareness plane that we're on right now, as we're finding out more about ourselves and more about our people. So today I wanted to ask him how he feels about this encounter that Kanye had with Donald Trump. You know, that's still fresh in the news. Some people were shocked and others were expecting it, because they kind of sort of had a meeting like this earlier in the year where it sort of divided us, you know, where black people were saying, I don't mess with, or I don't F with Kanye anymore, and other people say, yeah, you know, some of the things that Kanye said were right. So I wanted to ask you is, what do you think their angle is in terms of making this sort of meeting so public?
Right. Well, first, like, what people have to understand is that the elite, they use personalities. And Kanye West has a very polarizing personality. So people either love him or they hate him. And a lot of times what we don't understand is we don't understand ourselves. So if we understood ourselves, we would understand why I hate him or why I don't like him. You understand? And most of the time what it is that when we see different celebrities, like some people didn't like Whitney Houston, but some people loved her, right?
Right.
If they looked up their birth chart and they looked up Whitney Houston's birth chart, you might realize that I'm just not attracted to this person's personality because of ABCD versus what ABCD is in mine. So there will always be mechanisms of division no matter what. As cool as Obama was, some people didn't like Obama, some people did. You understand? The same with Donald Trump, right? So there'll always be things about people that would make us gravitate to them, and there are certain things about people that will make us want to repel them, you know? And with somebody like Kanye West that has the type of polarizing personality, right? Me and my boys, we call him the feminine acting Tupac, because he's a Gemini just like Tupac was. And if you remember, when Tupac would give interviews and he would spit in the camera, some people would be like, yeah, Pac is the realest. And then some people were like, nah, he crazy for doing that. It's the same thing. The same principles apply. The problem with us collectively is we don't know how to remove our emotions. You understand? If we remove our emotions from situations and then we just sit back and we listen to whatever Kanye says, we'll see the genius in it, and then we'll also be able to throw away the things that we don't want.
Absolutely, absolutely. So my next question is, we will have on October 22nd here in this area, they are opening up the polls for early voting.
Okay.
A lot of people have put a lot of weight on these midterm elections, as if enough people come out and enough people that have never voted in the past get out and register, you know, we can take this White House back,
Mm-hmm.
and we can gain some control.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I say we, I am speaking of primarily the Democrats.
Right.
So I want to ask you if you see a difference in the two parties. I was there last weekend and I
Mhm.
heard his response, but I'll have him share it
Right.
with you. Is there a difference between Democrat and Republican?
No. Um, right wing, left wing is on the same bird. And the real issue is that when we understand politically what has happened throughout different terms of presidencies and even local elections, most of the time, by the time a politician is at a place of significance, they've already been bought and paid for. So they will always support whatever the agenda is, and the whole thing is to give a means again to separate the people. So Obama, again, as cool as he was, family man, everything that he personified as the president, you still have all these people over here on this side of the spectrum, whether it be because of racism, whether it be because of them feeling like they're losing control of the stronghold that they once had, whatever the case may be, they found fault with Barack Obama. And if you just go back and you just look at every administration, it's always the same thing. So it's always a seesaw effect that's taking place. And the real solution for us is to realize that, one, the only polls that matter that you should really be serious about are the ones that affect you directly in your community, where you actually can have a say-so. And secondly, when we talk about Democrat, Republican, and all of these different things, we have to realize that no politician has been able to really truthfully help us yet at this point.
So let me ask you this question. This is the way that I view the government and the administration. Okay, from 4 to 8 years is either Democrat or Republican.
Right.
And the way that usually works, after 4 to 8 years, or after 8 years, it's definitely going over to the other party.
Absolutely.
So the new party comes in and they start rescinding all these policies that the previous administration
Right.
put into place. And with that type of system, how can we possibly get ahead, and how can we put power in the hands of the people, which is what a democratic society is supposed to be?
Right.
So if I'm hearing you right, I think you suggested putting the power in the hands of the people in the community.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And would you please tell us how that works, or what you envision? How can we give more power to the people in the community? What can we do?
Well, first and foremost, we have to understand just politically, like, you have pros and you have cons, right? So if you have pro and con, and they're polar opposites of one another, right? What's the polar opposite of progress?
Regress.
Congress.
Congress. Okay. Yes, against gressing. Yes.
Right. You understand?
Uh-huh.
And that's actually one of our governing bodies. So then when you look at the word government, mental, and what does it mean to govern something?
Mhm.
To control it.
Right.
Government is really meaning mind control.
the mind, yes.
You understand?
Uh-huh.
So it's a means in which, first and foremost, we have to realize our obligation to our community, our children, right? And what we have to start to realize we have to do collectively is we have to work in small clusters with like-minded individuals, right? And you work from these small clusters outward, because any real grassroots movement that starts with the right mindset, the right goals and the right visions and the right people that actually want to work, then the only thing that can stop that is those people allowing outside forces to come in. So that's where we have to understand economics, right? So that we actually take our money and we put it into the hands of the people who are actually doing things that are benevolent for us and actually laying out what they're going to do versus selling us a dream, saying I'm going to do this and then it never happens. And then from that standpoint, what we have to realize is that anything that you build, it will grow, because we live in a society of people that, one, they want something, especially our community. We want something righteous that we can be a part of, that we can support, right?
Correct.
And then, two, if we have like-minded individuals that are working together for common goals, there's nothing that can stop that. There's nothing that can stop the unification of minds. If the most powerful thing in the universe is a controlled thought, and that's why man, know thyself, is probably the most powerful statement ever.
It is. I love that one.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask you, before we turned the camera on, we got into this thing about, Black Lives Matter.
Right.
How the organization came about, the realness, if there's any realness behind it. So I'm going to have him speak with us about the Black Lives Matter
So
movement.
a large part of what I teach people and I write about in my books is social engineering. And the actual philosopher that came up with it was a man named Joseph Hegel. And it became known as Hegelian philosophy. And then after that, it became known as the Hegelian dialectic. And what this is a means to be able to manufacture means in which you basically give a person no options but to convey to whatever your plan is. So, as we were speaking earlier, I was talking to you off camera about the communist revolution and how that ended up being something that started from Zionist Jews creating this literature that became propagandized by Vladimir Lenin, was the main person who was half Jewish. And he ended up being the person who brought it into Russia. Karl Marx also was Jewish. And it was called Marxism at first.
Right.
And this became the philosophy that ended up being the revolution that ousted Tsar Nicholas II in Russia. Reason that was so important is because Russia and Germany were the throughway to Europe, and the bankers were in Great Britain, right? So what they were basically trying to make sure that they did was they were trying to geopolitically manufacture ways to be able to further their agenda for the next 100 years. And what we end up doing is we end up being reactive versus proactive. So we wait for something to happen, and then they put it on the news or they put it in social media and they put it in front of us, and they give us all of these puppets that they've already paid off ahead of time to provide this false narrative or whatever it is. So Black Lives Matter is no different. One of my real good people that I met over the years is a sister that was actually heavily involved in the community in Ferguson, Missouri. And she basically laid the whole thing out to me, how Talib Kweli was never around there, and the people from Black Lives Matter, how all of these people showed up once the camera started rolling, and the real people who had the real voices in Ferguson, Missouri were never seen. the people who really knew what was going on were never seen, you know. And me personally, that has happened to me. I've been the spokesperson for the Wayne Williams Freedom Project since 2013, and I've been working and investigating the Atlanta child murders and what really happened and what was the conspiracy that put Wayne Williams in prison. And there have been multiple TV shows. There's been a multi-million-dollar podcast that's been made, and they've been made by people who actually have no knowledge of what really went on. And basically they went on TV with interviews that they did with me. They took what I said verbatim, punctuatum almost, and went on TV and regurgitated what I told them about what was really going on. You understand? And that's what they do. They give us puppets to create the false narrative, you know. And it's been going on for hundreds and hundreds of years, and it will continue to go on until we realize what we have to do to stop it.
So another thing we were talking about before the cameras started rolling, I think next time I meet with this gentleman, I'm just going to turn on the camera from the moment we meet and just let it roll, and I'll extract what I need from it afterwards. But we were also talking about the imprisonment of Bill Cosby.
Right.
You know, and everybody's saying that Bill Cosby wanted to buy NBC.
Right.
But we're sitting here talking about Bill Cosby didn't have NBC money.
Right.
But he was actually working on something else, and Mr. Hendrix is going to tell us about that.
Right. So around the same time I got involved with the Wayne Williams Freedom Project, I got calls from people who were basically explaining that Bill Cosby was getting ready to try to start an all Nubian network that would be focused on our stories and putting everything in a positive light. It was going to be positive television programming. And I truthfully think that's why they came after him the way that they came after him. You know, even when you look at the charges and the allegations that were made, I mean, somebody can come, you know, 20, 30 years after something happened and said, this happened to me. And, you know, a person of his stature ends up, you know, going to prison. And what we have to realize is, because sexual abuse, molestation, and things of that nature are such a big deal in our community, and there's so many injustices that have been perpetuated against young women, you know, as they grow up, you end up having a generational curse that now gets to be put in front of us collectively as a stimulus. So what ends up happening is the people who identify with that they setting this brother up, or they doing whatever they doing, and they come to his aid or come to his defense, now they're met with all of this anger and emotion from all of this repression that has happened to all of these women. So it's another mechanism of division that gets placed in front of us. And we have to realize the reason they do these things, and we also have to realize, you know, we have to be smart enough to understand even the charges, because he wasn't convicted of rape, he was charged with sexual assault. So depending on the setting, if I do you like this somewhere, that could be considered sexual assault. You understand? So the how could I say that? Those charges could be very broad, you know, and to bring someone's dirt 30, 40, however many years later, and now try to bring them in the courtroom, we have to realize that truthfully that's not even legal.
Well, you know, because like what happened to the statute of limitations?
Exactly.
You know, just does not apply here at all, it seems. But one thing I want to mention too about the Me Too movement is the African American woman that came up with the hashtag was basically the invisible the whole time. And maybe it was because she didn't look like the face of the Me Too movement because she was African American. And maybe
Good
she
point.
didn't have, sharp or as soft features as they would have wanted her to have. But that goes back to us saying that these movements come around based upon something that has happened, someone's death, some very, very sad and emotional, which raises a lot of emotions, feelings, and hurt to that particular family. And these families are not even involved with these movements.
Right.
Now, I recall meeting with Alton Sterling's wife earlier in the year. Yes, I met her. She came here to Dallas. And we were talking, and I said, well, were you aware that Nick Cannon had become a part of this Don't Shoot protest that they had? And she said that she was not aware.
Right.
He didn't contact her. Nobody else that was out there protesting, the stars that
Right.
went out to protest
Right.
what was happening, what was going on. She knew nothing about it.
Right.
So which makes me wonder, how can you use this man's name and not go out of your way to make sure? If I was able to contact her and have a meeting with her, they certainly could have done the same.
Right.
And if they couldn't get involved with the closest family members, maybe they should have just left it alone. But
It makes people, it makes it easier to see how disingenuous a lot of the things that get used to further a celebrity's popularity, and again give some false narrative as to say that they really care about the community or whatever the case may be. Because if you really cared, you would really be there, and you would really hug the mother and tell her, I feel your pain and I'm here for you, and you would try to help the family sincerely.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
One thing I do know is that for a protest to have swelled to the size that this one did for Alton Sterling, and on occasion the family still speak to the fact that there is something that they are trying to get, which requires the finances that they don't have in their possession at the time.
Exactly.
It's not something that I can, I just can't understand it.
Right.
It's too complex for me to try to understand or figure out why these families are not taken care of forever.
Absolutely.
The children forever. They
Right.
should never want for anything, but people on occasion for their needs can fly them out to do an interview.
Right. 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 And absolutely. And even going back to the Atlanta child murders, that's been the disgust that a lot of the actual family members of victims have expressed to me, is that one of the mothers in particular, she will tell you, I've been in interviews all the way in Canada and Great Britain, and I've interviewed for all of these different radio stations and networks and everything else, and they won't even publish her words. They edit the film to make it a 1:30 interview when she gave them an hour and 15-minute interview, because it's the whole means in which they propagandize these situations. They do them to make sure that it's some sort of benefit to them, and it's never about justice, and it's never about doing the right thing. It's always about exploitation of whatever the situation is to further an agenda.
It's true. It's true. It really amazes me how that works.